pick up the loaf of bread in your kitchen right now. Seriously, go grab it, turn it over, and read the ingredient list out loud. If you're holding a typical loaf of supermarket sandwich bread, you're about to read somewhere between 15 and 30 ingredients. Some of them you'll recognize, like flour and water. Many of them you absolutely won't. And I'm going to tell you something right off the bat that will make you rethink your entire breakfast. At least one of those ingredients might be the exact same chemical used to make the foam inside yoga mats and the padding in running shoes. It's a chemical that's banned in food across Europe, but it's totally legal in your sandwich. Real bread requires just 4 simple ingredients: flour, water, salt, and yeast. That is the entire recipe that fed civilizations for thousands of years. A genuine sourdough loaf needs even less: just flour, water, salt, and a living starter culture. You mix, you let it rise, you bake, and you have bread. No dough conditioners, no preservatives, no added sugar, and no chemicals that sound like they belong in a pesticide. But the modern American bread aisle has turned that 4-ingredient staple into one of the most chemically engineered, stripped down, and additives-laden products in the entire grocery store. We've traded nutrition for fluffiness and speed, and the results are not pretty. That soft, pillowy texture that makes you think of childhood is often a product of chemical emulsifiers and industrial chemistry, not actual chemistry. And the healthy whole wheat option? It's frequently just white bread that's been dyed brown with caramel color and had some processed fiber powder dumped back into it. Today, we're cutting through the marketing garbage. You're going to find out, first, the 10 worst supermarket bread brands and common industry practices that are screwing up your nutrition and potentially your health. Second, the specific chemical additives, dough conditioners, and preservatives you must avoid, and why they're in there in the first place. Spoiler, it's for the factory's convenience, not yours. Third, the clever whole grain white trick that tricks millions of parents into buying junk, and the single chemical that's been banned in over 40 countries, including the entire EU, but is still legal in the USA. And near the end of this investigation, I'll show you the 5 specific rules for spotting real bread on your own, and the 5 actual, verifiably clean brands you should buy instead, including some you can find in almost any mainstream American store. By the time we're done, you'll know more about the bread aisle than 90% of other shoppers, and you will never look at that loaf of white fluff the same way again. Now, before we expose the brands, we need to understand the simple mechanics of how the bread industry is cheating you. Think of real bread like a sturdy handcrafted table. It's made from a few solid materials: flour, water, salt, yeast that are given the time to properly cure and bond, creating a real structure with natural strength and flavor. Slow fermentation develops gluten naturally and produces acids that stop mold. It takes time and skill. Industrial bread, the stuff you find filling 90% of the shelf space at Kroger or Target, is like a cheap piece of furniture made of particle board glued together and laminated. The industry wants to produce bread as fast and as cheaply as possible, so they skip the long fermentation. This means the bread has no natural flavor and no strong gluten network, and it would mold instantly. So, to solve all the problems they created by rushing, they have to use chemistry. Every fact I'm about to give you will reveal a mini deception, but this is the foundation. When you skip the time, you have to add the additives. They add chemical duff conditioners like datum and mono and diglycerides to artificially strengthen the weak gluten and make the dough move through high-speed machines without tearing. These are like chemical scaffolding, and because fast fermented industrial dough is bland and flat, they add high fructose corn syrup or sugar to make it taste like something, anything. And the white flour foundation? That's another story entirely. The industrial process starts by stripping the wheat kernel of its bran and its germ. the two parts that contain the fiber, healthy fats, and nearly all the vitamins. They leave only the starchy center, bleach it, and then enrich it by dumping back in a handful of synthetic lab-made vitamins to replace the dozens of natural nutrients they just removed. And finally, they add chemical preservatives like calcium propionate so that loaf can sit on your counter for 2 or 3 weeks without molding, a feat real bread cannot perform. It's a science experiment designed to look like a loaf of bread, and once you start reading the labels, the deception becomes impossible to ignore. Tone, conversational, slightly outraged, with sarcasm aimed at the industry. The viewer is an ally. Let's start tearing into the actual shelves, beginning with the stuff that relies on maximum processing to hit the rock bottom price point. Number 10 is Walmart's Great Value White Bread. If you look at the financials, Walmart reported massive revenues exceeding $648 billion recently, and they didn't get there by giving away premium ingredients out of the goodness of their hearts. This stuff is often sold for less than $1.50 a loaf, and that dirt cheap price is achieved the exact same way it's achieved across the budget grocery aisle, by using the absolute cheapest possible ingredients and the fastest, most aggressive production methods known to industrial manufacturing. Turn that great value bag over. The foundation is enriched bleached flour, water, sugar, or high fructose corn syrup, and yeast, immediately followed by an absolute laundry list of chemical dough conditioners and synthetic preservatives. The flour itself is stripped of its bran and germ, which are the only parts of the wheat kernel that actually contain fiber, healthy fats, and nutrients. What's left is a starchy endosperm that's rapidly digested into sugar, which they then enrich with a tiny handful of synthetic vitamins to replace the dozens of natural ones they milled away. And like almost all store brands, Great Value is produced by anonymous contract manufacturers whose names never appear on the packaging. You have no clue which industrial factory baked that loaf, what their actual quality standards are, or if the formulation shifted between last week and this week. When the cheapest bread on the shelf is built on bleached, structurally dead flour and a cocktail of dough conditioners, the small savings you get at the cash register come directly at the expense of your metabolic health. It feels like eating compressed, edible foam that dissolves into a sticky paste the second it hits your tongue. Moving along the budget aisle, number 9 is Kroger brand bread. Kroger is the largest traditional supermarket chain in the United States, and its private label loaves compete dollar for dollar with Walmart and the budget national brands. The fundamental issue here is identical: total lack of transparency. You cannot verify the wheat source, the milling process, or the chemical additive list from one month to the next because the contract bakery can change behind the scenes whenever Kroger finds a cheaper supplier. The loaf you buy today might come from a completely different facility with a completely different chemical recipe than the one you bought 3 weeks ago. Even though the bag looks identical, a quick glance at the label reveals the exact same corporate toolkit: highly refined flour, added sugars, soybean oil, dough conditioners like daidine or mono and diglycerides, and the chemical preservative calcium propionate to unnaturally extend shelf life. It is engineered for the lowest possible manufacturing cost and the absolute longest possible survival time on a shelf, meaning maximum chemical processing and zero resemblance to actual bread. The price is low, the ingredient list is incredibly long, and those two facts are directly connected by corporate greed. Now let's talk about a household icon that took this industrial chemistry and turned it into an American legend. Number 8 is Wonder Bread. This is the brand that practically defined soft, fluffy, pre-sliced sandwich bread for generations of Americans. Wonder Bread is currently owned by Flowers Foods, a massive packaged bakery corporation with annual revenues pulling in over $5 billion, which also happens to own Nature's Own, Dave's Killer Bread, and Canyon Bakehouse. The Wonder Bread Classic White Ingredient List reads like a guided tour through a high-intensity industrial chemistry lab. After you get past the unbleached enriched flour, water, sugar, and yeast, the label drops a massive dough conditioner cocktail. It explicitly lists sodium sterol lactylate, calcium sterol lactylate, monoglycerides, mono and diglycerides, distilled monoglycerides, calcium peroxide, calcium iodate, datum, ethoxylated mono and diglycerides, enzymes, and ascorbic acid. And that's not all. They toss in soybean oil, vinegar, monocalcium phosphate, citric acid, soy lecithin, and calcium propionate to stop it from rotting. That is well over a dozen purely chemical ingredients beyond the 4 that real bread requires. Each one of these scientific additions solves a mechanical problem created by high-speed machines. The conditioners allow the dough to fly through rapid automation without tearing and force it to puff up instantly, completely skipping the hours of natural fermentation needed to build real structure and digestible proteins. Look closely at calcium iodate and calcium peroxide on that label. These are powerful oxidizing agents used to replace potassium bromate. They strengthen the dough chemically because the factory refuses to slow down and let the dough develop naturally. Wonder Bread is the ultimate poster child for trading a traditional kitchen recipe for a chemistry set. Its famous pillowy texture, the kind where you can literally compress a whole slice into a tiny, doughy marble between 2 fingers, is a direct result of this chemical engineering. Real bread has structural integrity because slow fermentation built a real gluten network. Wonder Bread mimics that structure artificially with emulsifiers while skipping the time it takes to build it honestly. If you already feel like turning around and checking your own pantry shelf right now, smash that subscribe button, because the corporate tricks get even harsher from here. Next up, let's look at the global giants controlling the middle shelves. Number 7 is Sara Lee, which is owned by Grupo Bimbo. If you haven't heard of Grupo Bimbo, they are the single largest baking company on the planet. Headquartered in Mexico City, but running massive operations across the U.S. with annual revenues blasting past $20 billion. They own Thomas, Oro Wheat, Brown Berry, Entenmann's, and Ballpark Buns. Sara Lee's classic white and standard wheat breads follow the exact same high-speed industrial template: highly refined flour, water, sugar, yeast, soybean oil, a heavy dose of dough conditioners, and chemical preservatives like calcium propionate and sorbic acid. To their credit, under intense consumer pressure, they removed high fructose corn syrup from some of their top sellers and swapped it for regular sugar. That's a tiny, modest victory, but it completely proves the point. The corn syrup was never necessary to begin with. It was just a cheap way to sweeten a dead dough. Yet, the broader Sara Lee line remains stuffed with additives. Take their honey whole wheat, for example. Despite the ultra-wholesome, rustic imagery on the front, the back reveals modified wheat starch, cellulose fiber, datem, monoglycerides, cellulose gum, soy lecithin, and stevia leaf sweetener, alongside the actual honey and sugar. A product marketed on the innocent image of golden honey and simple whole wheat contains a longer list of industrial texturizers and sweeteners than any regular consumer would ever expect. This leads us directly into number 6, which deserves its own spotlight for pure marketing genius: the Sara Lee Delightful and the Made with Whole Grain White trick. This is one of the most clever pieces of deceptive positioning in the entire grocery store. It is engineered specifically to give busy, well-meaning parents a green light to buy soft, pale bread that looks and tastes like white bread while feeling good about health claims. The corporate trick works beautifully. The bread technically starts with whole wheat flour, but it is immediately packed with modified wheat starch, isolated cellulose fiber, and inulin, also known as chicory root fiber, to artificially jack up the fiber count on the nutrition panel while driving down the calorie count per slice. The result is a pale, ultra-soft loaf that loudly shouts high fiber and low calorie on the front of the bag. But look at the cost of that chemical manipulation on the back. Sugar, datum, monoglycerides, soy lecithin, cellulose gum, monocalcium phosphate, citric acid, and stevia leaf sweetener alongside calcium propionate and sorbic acid. Let's talk about that added cellulose fiber. Organizations like the Environmental Working Group have pointed out that added cellulose fiber is frequently extracted from processed industrial byproducts like wood pulp or plant waste, turned into a fine powder, and dumped into industrial food to fake a high fiber content. Furthermore, isolated added fibers like inulin and powdered wood pulp don't behave the same ways inside your digestive tract as the natural fiber found in an intact whole grain. Natural fiber is bound up with the bran, germ, minerals, and slow digesting starches of the actual plant, regulating your insulin response. These isolated fibers are just bolted onto a highly refined flour base to make a label look pretty for a shopper in a rush. The fiber number on the front goes up, but you are still buying a heavily processed, highly sweetened loaf wearing a health food costume. Now let's zoom out to the broader health concerns that plague the entire mass market bread industry across the United States. Number 5 is the yoga mat chemical, azodicarbonamide, or ADA. In 2014, a massive public controversy erupted when a food blogger exposed that a major fast food chain was using this industrial foaming agent in its sandwich buns. The public was shocked to learn that the exact same chemical mixed into polymer gels to create the tiny gas bubbles that make yoga mats, shoe soles, and foam insulation soft and spongy was being fed to them at lunch. What most Americans don't realize is that ADA never actually went away. It is still fully permitted by the FDA in American bread today as a dough conditioner and flour bleaching agent. The FDA allows it at up to 45 parts per million. The real danger isn't just the plastic association, it's what ADA breaks down into during the commercial baking process. When heated, azodicarbonamide forms semicarbazide and urethane. Rigorous independent laboratory studies have shown that semicarbazide causes tumors in lab animals, and urethane is recognized as a probable human carcinogen. Because of these clear health risks, ADA is completely banned as a food additive in the European Union, the United Kingdom, and Australia, and many other nations. Yet it remains legal in the US. The Environmental Working Group placed azodicarbonamide on its Dirty Dozen Guide to Food Chemicals, emphasizing that it is an entirely unnecessary additive. While some major brands pulled it under intense consumer backlash, it still quietly shows up across the American grocery supply, particularly in ultra-low-cost store-brand loaves, hamburger buns, and commercial restaurant rolls. It exists purely for the mechanical convenience of giant industrial factories, not for the health of the human beings eating it. If that's not enough to make you angry, consider number 4, the potassium bromate problem. This is one of the oldest, most hazardous dough conditioners in the entire history of industrial baking. It's an oxidizing agent used to artificially strengthen the gluten network, force a higher rise, and create a perfectly uniform, predictable loaf every single time. It is banned in more than 40 countries worldwide, including Canada, the UK, China, Brazil, and the entire EU. Why? Because it is linked directly to cancer. The International Agency for Research on Cancer classifies potassium bromate as a clear carcinogen, and the state of California lists it under Proposition 65 as a known cancer-causing chemical. In 2023, California took action and passed a bill banning potassium bromate from all foods manufactured or sold in the state. But at the federal level, the FDA has dragged its feet for decades, leaving it perfectly legal for the rest of America. The corporate excuse is that baking supposedly converts all the harmful bromate into harmless potassium bromide. But independent laboratory testing has repeatedly proven that if the oven temperature shifts even slightly, or if the factory adds just a fraction too much, dangerous residual bromate remains in the finished bread that you feed your family. That Number 3 is the broader dough conditioner cocktail that floods almost every mainstream bag. Even if a brand avoids the high-profile scandals of ADA or bromate, they routinely use a synthetic blend of emulsifiers like Datem, sodium stearoyl lactylate, and mono and diglycerides. The massive health concern here is twofold. First, mono and diglycerides are frequently derived from oils processed in a way that leaves trace amounts of artificial trans fats, the exact type of fat the CDC states has absolutely no safe level of consumption and is directly tied to heart disease. Because these ingredients are legally classified as emulsifiers rather than fats, corporations exploit a legal loophole that allows them to label the bread as having zero gene trans fat, even though it contains cumulative trace amounts. Second, cutting-edge medical research published in major gastroenterology journals has begun to show that these exact dietary emulsifiers can degrade the protective mucus lining of the human intestine and disrupt the gut microbiome, potentially contributing to chronic low-grade inflammation. Let's look at another deceptive industry-wide staple. Number 2, the whole wheat deception. The words wheat bread or multigrain on a grocery store label are designed to manipulate your healthy intentions. Under current regulations, a manufacturer can label a loaf wheat bread even if it is made from 95% highly refined white flour, because white flour technically comes from a wheat plant. To complete the optical illusion, they add caramel coloring or industrial molasses to dye the white dough a rich, rustic brown, triggering your psychological association between brown food and health. A senior managing type 2 diabetes or insulin resistance might buy these brown loaves for years, thinking they are making a medical choice to avoid blood sugar spikes, while actually eating a highly refined starch that spikes their glucose just as fast as a sugar-loaded white loaf. Unless the bag explicitly states 100% whole wheat or 100% whole grain, you are buying white bread that has been given a chemical tan. Finally, let's talk about a premium brand that uses pure heritage marketing to mask these exact same industrial practices. Number 1 is Pepperidge Farm, owned by the massive Campbell Company, which pulls in over $9 billion in annual revenue. Pepperidge Farm's entire brand image is built on a cozy, rustic farmhouse aesthetic, making you picture a quaint country bakery with flour-dusted tables and slow, careful baking. But flip over their highly popular farmhouse or whole grain loaves. Many of them are loaded with soybean oil, added sugars, and chemical dough conditioners, featuring ingredient lists that run wildly beyond what real bread requires. You are paying a premium price point at Target or Safeway because the bag looks beautiful and rustic, but biochemically, you are often getting a very similar, highly automated, additive-heavy product as the budget loaf sitting right next to it. The premium isn't for a better, cleaner recipe. The premium is for the brilliant marketing that lowered your guard in the first place. And now, what it was worth watching all the way through for. We are completely flipping the script from the corporate cutting of corners to the actual heroes of the bread aisle. This is the part of the video where we look at what you should actually put into your cart when you are standing at Whole Foods, Trader Joe's, or even your local standard grocery store like Publix or Safeway. Because despite how bleak the middle of the aisle looks, there are companies out there making real, honest food that respects both your digestive tract and your intelligence. Let's start with a mainstream favorite that you can buy at almost any regular supermarket right now. Number 5 is Dave's Killer Bread Organic. Even though this brand was bought out by the mega bakery corporation Flowers Foods, they managed to maintain their foundational commitment to completely clean ingredient profiles on their core organic loaves. When you look at their iconic 21 whole grains and seeds or their power seed loaf, you will notice an absolute absence of chemical processing shorthand. There is no datum, no sodium stearoyl lactylate, and absolutely zero calcium propionate hiding in the fine print. Instead, they build their dough on a base of certified organic whole grains and seeds, giving you actual, non-stripped nutrition straight from the soil. In practice, eating a slice of this feels entirely different from the white foam we just ripped apart. It is heavy, it has a dense, satisfying chew, and it smells like actual nutty grain instead of synthetic vinegar or industrial yeast. Price-wise, it sits around $6 to $7 a loaf at Target or Walmart, which translates to roughly 30 to 35 cents per sandwich slice. Yes, it costs more than a generic $1.50 store brand, but you are paying for actual organic whole food instead of synthetic scaffolding. If there is a downside to watch out for, it is that some of their popular lines do contain added organic cane sugar to keep them palatable for the mainstream American palate. So if you are strictly watching your blood sugar, read the back and grab their power seed option, which keeps the sugar down to just 1 gram per slice. If you want to step up the nutritional profile even further, look for number 4. Silver Hills Sprouted Power Bread. This is a brand specializing entirely in sprouted whole grain bread, and they are widely available in the bread or freezer sections of natural food stores and major grocery chains across the country. Their philosophy centers on the biological fact that sprouting a grain before baking completely transforms its nutritional chemistry. They soak the organic whole wheat kernels until they actually begin to grow, which naturally breaks down the harsh phytic acid inside the grain, unlocking vitamins and making the minerals vastly easier for your body to absorb. Their ingredient list is incredibly tight. Sprouted whole wheat, water, wheat gluten, organic cane sugar, yeast, and sea salt. That is it. No azodicarbonamide, no potassium bromate, and no high fructose corn syrup. When you toast a slice of Silver Hills, the natural starches that were converted during the sprouting process create a rich, deeply roasted flavor that beats any conventional mass market loaf hands down. It averages around $5 to $6 per loaf, making it an incredibly reasonable investment for an everyday sandwich staple that actually acts like a complex carbohydrate instead of a blood sugar rocket. Now, for the absolute gold standard of commercial nutrition, number 3 is Food for Life Ezekiel 4-9 Sprouted Grain Bread. This stuff is an absolute legend in the clean eating community, and you can find it in the freezer section of almost any major grocery store from Trader Joe's to Walmart for around $7 to $8 a loaf. Food for Life doesn't use a single grain of traditional flour. Instead, they take a unique blend of organic whole grains and legumes, including wheat, barley, millet, spelt, lentils, and soybeans, sprout them together, and mash them into a nutrient-dense living dough. The ingredient list is incredibly short, completely clean, and contains zero added sugar whatsoever. Because it contains absolutely no chemical preservatives like calcium propionate to stop natural mold, it is sold exclusively frozen. You keep it in your freezer, take out a slice as you need it, and pop it straight into the toaster. The sensory experience is incredibly hearty. It has a robust, rustic texture that holds up beautifully to heavy toppings like avocado or eggs without turning into soggy mush. A clinical analysis of sprouted breads like Ezekiel shows that the combination of grains and legumes creates a complete protein containing all 9 essential amino acids, while keeping the glycemic index incredibly low. It is the ultimate option for seniors managing diabetes or anyone looking for a clean, slow-burning fuel source. The only real downside is that if you try to eat it straight out of the bag without toasting it, it can feel a bit dry and heavy, but a quick spin in the toaster completely unlocks its nutty flavor. If you want something that feels like a traditional old world culinary experience, number two is genuine bakery sourdough. You don't look for this in the middle of the long commercial shelves. You find it in the fresh bakery section of places like Whole Foods, Wegmans, or HEB, or better yet, at a local independent bakery or farmer's market. A real sourdough loaf is a true marvel of ancient food science. It relies entirely on a wild living starter culture, which means the only ingredients listed on the tag are flour, water, and salt. The long, slow 24-hour fermentation process allows the wild lactobacilli bacteria to consume the sugars and starches in the flour naturally, creating organic acetic and propionic acids that give the bread its signature tangy flavor and naturally protect it from molding without a single drop of added calcium propionate. When you cut into a real loaf of fresh sourdough, you get a thick, blistered, crunchy crust and an open, chewy interior full of beautiful air pockets. Independent laboratory data confirms that this natural fermentation process breaks down a massive portion of the grain's gluten and fructans, making it incredibly gentle on people who suffer from non-celiac gluten sensitivity. It typically costs between $6 and $9 a loaf, but because it is so incredibly dense and satisfying, a single slice goes a very long way. And finally, number one is the absolute purest, cheapest, and highest quality bread on the planet. The loaf you bake yourself in your own kitchen. I know what you are thinking. You don't have time to be an artisanal baker, but the industry has lied to you about how hard it is to make real food. The absolute basic no-knead bread recipe requires exactly 4 ingredients: 4 cups of unbleached flour, 2 cups of warm water, 2 teaspoons of salt, and a single teaspoon of active dry yeast. You literally stir them together in a bowl with a spoon for 60 seconds until a sticky dough forms. Cover it with a towel and let it sit on your counter overnight while you sleep. The next morning, you dump it into a hot Dutch oven and bake it for 40 minutes. The total active work time is under 5 minutes, and the total financial cost is well under $1 per loaf. What you get out of that oven is a steaming, golden, crackling masterpiece of real human food that contains absolutely no dough conditioners, no industrial bleaching agents, no high fructose corn syrup, and no plastics. You control the ingredients completely, you save money, and you reconnect with the exact same 4-ingredient food that sustained human health for thousands of years before factories decided to turn our daily bread into a corporate science project. When you are standing in the bread aisle at a standard American grocery store like Kroger, Publix, or Safeway, your absolute first line of defense is to turn the bag around and count the total number of items in the ingredient list. If that list spirals past 5 or 6 items into a dense block of text that looks like a pharmaceutical printout, you are no longer holding real bread. You are holding a highly engineered industrial commodity designed to survive a nuclear winter on a warehouse pallet. You must completely blind yourself to the bright, reassuring marketing claims plastered across the front of the bag like wheat bread, multigrain, or made with whole grains, because these are legal loopholes designed to disguise highly refined white flour that has been given a fake chemical tan with corporate caramel coloring. The only phrase that guarantees you are getting genuine, unstripped nutrition from the whole wheat kernel is 100% whole wheat or 100% whole grain, and it must be listed as the absolute first flour on the back of the package. Actively scan the chemical fine print for specific corporate red flags such as azodicarbonamide, potassium bromate, bromated flour, datum, or an endless string of ethoxylated mono and diglycerides. These compounds are purely industrial processing aids used to force dead dough through automated machinery at breakneck speeds. And several of them are completely banned in civil societies across Europe because independent laboratories link them to respiratory hazards and cellular toxicity. Make it a habit to bypass the center aisles of Walmart or Target entirely and hunt for your bread in the fresh perimeter bakery section or the commercial freezer case where real food hides. Real, honest bread made without synthetic preservatives like calcium propionate or sorbic acid will naturally grow mold within a few days of sitting in your warm kitchen, which means a loaf that remains perfectly soft and pristine after 3 weeks on your counter is not fresh. It is a preserved chemical illusion. Look for explicit green lights on the label like naturally leavened, wild yeast, or organic sprouted grains, which serve as verifiable proof that the manufacturer used traditional methods rather than industrial shorthand. These terms signify that the grain went through a slow fermentation or germination process that naturally breaks down inflammatory phytic acid, making the bread vastly more digestible and preventing the massive blood sugar spikes caused by cheap white fluff. Check the added sugar line on the nutrition facts panel and firmly reject any sandwich loaf that delivers more than 1 gram of sugar per slice. Mass market brands routinely flood their dough with high fructose corn syrup or cane sugar to mask the completely flat, bland taste of unfermented flour, essentially tricking you into serving your family a highly processed dessert disguised as a dinner roll. The entire multi-billion-dollar American commercial baking industry is fundamentally built on a systemic deception, replacing the essential element of time and honest raw materials with cheap, high-speed chemical manipulation to maximize corporate profit margins. To stop being a passive victim of this grocery store psychological warfare, you only need to make one single shift in your thinking. Stop evaluating bread by how soft it feels when you squeeze it in the store and start judging it strictly by how closely it adheres to the ancient 4-ingredient standard. When you firmly refuse to fund the science projects cluttering the shelves, you regain control over your metabolic health and vote for a cleaner food supply with your wallet. Thank you so much for spending your valuable time uncovering the truth about our daily food system with me today. Your attention is the ultimate weapon against corporate greed. If this investigation opened your eyes or changed how you plan to shop this weekend, please share this video with a friend or a family member who packs a sandwich for work every single day and deserves to know exactly what they are truly putting into their body. I want to hear from you directly, so drop a comment below right now and let me know which of these specific bread brands is sitting in your kitchen pantry at this very moment. If you are ready to keep reclaiming your health from clever supermarket marketing traps, stay tuned for our next deep dive expose, where we are going to tear apart the disturbing truth behind America's favorite industrial cooking oils and salad dressings. Stop buying their science projects